Hey, everybody. Welcome to the B2B Revenue Leadership Podcast. Hey, what we do on this podcast is talk about what B2B sales and marketing leaders, operators, and experts are doing today to really break through and grow their businesses at exponential levels. Let's get it in the interview. At the end, I'll give you an update on my courses, and you can check out my website at b2brevenue.com, and it's Brian G. Burns on LinkedIn. Hey, Joe, welcome back to the show. As a way of getting started, give us a little update on yourself.
Yeah, so I guess nothing too new here, but what we essentially do here, and what I've been doing is working with mid-sized manufacturers to try to help them identify the right types of people from the right types of companies and get in front of them and start real sales conversations. Focus on creating value for them in their buying process, and so it's a lot of that going on.
Yeah, cool. Hey, you did a great webinar about how to do online prospecting. Mm-hmm. What was the motivation for that? What were some of the takeaways?
Yeah, so my audience, being the manufacturing sector, tends to be a little behind. The technology, tech companies, and even a lot of other professional services, and it's a lot of trade shows and cold calling and knocking on doors and more traditional means for prospecting and developing new business. What we've been successful doing is helping the clients that we work with figure out how to kind of not necessarily throw all that aside, but take elements of that. Yeah, exactly. And bring it into an online setting and leverage technology that frankly, a lot of people don't even realize they can leverage to be a lot more efficient. And
Cool. And you had a 4-step process. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, sure. So this webinar I did recently, we kind of broke it down into 4 steps. So I guess the first step is almost like 2 things, but it starts by creating focus on the right people from the right companies. I think every successful marketing or sales initiative is, you can't just try to be everything to everybody. You got to kind of dial in on the right people from the types of organizations that, make for the right customers. So creating focus and then building a list is really kind of the first step that we went into there. And part of building a list is, moving this into a digital setting is not only, talking about companies, but who are the individual people who influence the buying process there and their different roles, and finding these actual people and figuring out how are we going to contact those specific people online. So that's the first step. Next step is crafting messaging about what they actually care about, their pains, their goals, the common questions they have. There's so much of outbound prospecting that you see, and you see it in your own inbox every day. It's people just blasting these text-heavy messages at you all about themselves, right? And nobody
what they
cares.
do, yeah, and
exactly.
And unless you're in market, you don't care.
Yeah, of course not. Of course not. Yeah, and so, but there's a way to do it right, and it doesn't have to be heavy-hitting, sales-heavy messaging. If you can deliver value in that outbound approach, and actually, touch on things that other people like them, they care about because you've had experience working with individuals like that, and you lead with that, and you deliver content that is going to speak to those things that they care about. And that's what we want to craft messaging around. So the second step there, after you kind of identify who to focus on and build a list, is craft messaging that is actually going to, that's around things that they care about, right? And then the third step is launching an outbound campaign. So we talked about messaging, but the other piece of that is the right cadence and what tools you can use to do that. So that the actual execution of an outbound campaign, and when to follow up, how much of that to automate, how much to customize in a more manual way. And then the fourth step is sort of a bonus that I put in there, and it's about how do you amplify the reach of that campaign by using paid media. So if you've already built a list, well, you can target those same people, or at least those same companies, in a lot of different ways, piggybacking on the databases that LinkedIn and Facebook and, Google, maybe via YouTube, has available to you. So you can amplify what you're doing with paid media.
Yeah. And what do you see people doing wrong as far as building a list? I have a lot of people and I say, well, you only need to do 20 deals a year to meet your personal number.
Yeah.
Maybe those being active on LinkedIn might be the easiest 20 to do.
Sure. Yeah. No, that's a great point. And I think I'm personally in the camp of quality over volume when it comes to outbound. There are two ways to do it, right? Well, there's lots of ways to do it, but at the opposite end of the spectrum, you have, building a list of thousands of people and sending the same thing at them. And maybe, if your market's big enough, like that, you can target the message enough that it's somewhat effective, but a lot of that's going to fall on deaf ears. You're going to get marked as spam. You're going to hurt your email deliverability. You're going to, frankly, piss off a bunch of people who don't want to hear from you because they never wanted to in the first place. The opposite end of the spectrum is to say, let's dial in really tightly on the right people from the right companies. Let's choose some and let's launch a campaign where, we're spending time learning a little bit about that company and the people themselves. I mean, how easy is it to go try to learn something about somebody these days online? If they have any digital footprint, it's not that tough. Right. And I'll do things as simple as, I grew up in Milwaukee and everybody in the state of Wisconsin is a huge Packer fan, right? It's just in your blood. And so just infusing something like that into your message, just, finding ways to personally make a connection with somebody, and as opposed to just launching straight into, here's what you do, right?
Right. And because the likelihood that people would go from unaware to interested via an email is pretty, right?
Yeah.
They go from unaware to aware, but you got to kind of build that interest and awareness up, some curiosity, and understand that it's a process and not a binary switch.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that is probably, you asked what the biggest mistakes are. I think it's that. I mean, how often do you get an email on LinkedIn or an email from somebody and it's just, it's some completely generic line, giving you praise for something that they probably copied and pasted into, 100 other outbound messages. And then they just launch into their sales pitch. And I mean, that almost makes me more angry, right? It's insincere.
Usually I see if I'm connected. If I am, I unconnect because it's like, that's not what I want.
Right.
And that doesn't help me, doesn't help them.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
How about creating content together, creating content with your prospect or your ideal customer profile?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's the equivalent of what you and I are doing right now,
isn't it?
Right. It's like you do that with your customers. There's a great I don't know if you're familiar with James Carberry, Sweetfish Media, those guys, and he just wrote a book that I read the first week it came out in like one sitting. It was great. It's called content-based networking, and that's really the concept, right? It's you do what we're doing right now, where you have conversations with your customers, and whether it happens via a podcast or just a Zoom conversation that you record and you take clips of or post. It could be a text-based interview if that's the technology hurdle is too high for you to think about video or podcasting. So many ways to do it, but when you can put the spotlight on your customer and invite them into the conversation, well, everybody else like them is going to want to listen to this conversation and hear, how they've gotten through this problem or, accomplish this thing that everybody's trying to accomplish in their space, right?
Right. Because I think too much is trying to find somebody who's in market that isn't aware of us yet.
Yep.
And that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
That's the needle in the haystack.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it really is. And I think, inbound has a big role there. And if you think about creating exceptional content that addresses those things that your best customers care about, and it's super targeted, well, you can make inbound your long-term play. I mean, all of that content you create serves multiple purposes. It's going to help you from an inbound perspective over time, but in the short term, you can take that same content and deliver it directly to the people who you're trying to reach, right?
Yeah. And just, kind of talking about the problem that you solve and see how other people view it.
Yeah.
Because
And
it all starts with a conversation.
yeah, absolutely. And the things you learn, I imagine you having interviewed as many people as you have over the years, you've probably learned a ton from them, and you get your perspective changes the more you hear something from another person. Little nuggets, wind up influencing the way you're thinking. You get smarter too. So
Yeah. And is LinkedIn the primary platform for your market?
For my particular market, LinkedIn's a little spotty, honestly. But what I've found is that the companies that are more forward looking and more tech savvy are there. And often those are the companies who, when I look at who I serve in the manufacturing sector, those are the companies that are going to invest in digital. So I want to be there, even though it might be a small percentage of my audience, because the right people are there. And again, that's what matters. That's what we're talking about here, right? Finding the right people from the right companies, not just anybody who could be a potential customer. I think one of the characteristics of the people I'm trying to reach is that they value, I don't have to educate them all the way from, all we do is trade shows and print ads to, hey, there's an opportunity with digital marketing or digital prospecting. I want people who have made that, that shift on their own, and now they're trying to figure out how to do it really effectively.
Right, because clearly the future is digital. Yeah. The paper magazines and trade shows will always be there, and they have their purpose, but they're few and far between. And some of them are getting kind of skinny, and they're super expensive.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
and in marketing,
it's amazing
and sales,
when I hear
consistent.
Sometimes. Yeah. Absolutely. It's amazing what I hear sometimes about the investment in a trade show and in print ads too. I hear companies spending $10,000 a month on print ads in trade journals that who's even picking these things up. I mean, what you can do with that in an online setting is going to generate exponential returns, and you can actually measure it. You don't have to just sort of, make a spend and then hope the phones start ringing and decide if you're going to attribute that, what comes from it to, this print ad you ran.
And any other platforms have stickiness? Is it Facebook or YouTube or?
Sure. So yeah, I think I think for sure YouTube is a huge opportunity. I mean, especially when you have something that's, what you sell is complex and it's easier to show in pictures or even better video. So, for that reason, and at the same time, when you think about inbound, well, Google loves video, and if you can, the other thing about video is, you look at an interview like this, well, you could transcribe it, you could turn it into written content, you could hand it to a copywriter and clean it up so it's not just a transcript. You can break it down into little video pieces, you can break the text down into little clips to use in a variety of places. And then from a paid media standpoint, I think Facebook actually is a bigger opportunity than a lot of companies realize in the B2B space. I think you kind of default to thinking, oh, Facebook, well, that's a B2C platform, and we're finding that not to be true. Some of the best B2B ads that are served up to me, I see through Instagram, which is owned by Facebook, right? And I don't know how they've got their formula set up, but I find myself clicking ads all the time on Instagram and then kind of laughing at myself, like, oh, they got me, But the question to ask is, what platforms are your customers actually using, and not just for business, but if they're there and it's 9:00 at night and they're sitting there with, Sports Center on in the background and flipping through their phone, it's not like all of a sudden they don't care about things in their job.
Right. So especially when you do such micro-targeting,
exactly.
in manufacturing, where the geographies aren't as highly condensed. If it's in this small town in Wisconsin, you can put the ad at their demographic, a psychographic, and the things that and target, take your audience and your lookalike audience.
Yep.
You can guess pretty close to who they would be and put a little ad in there and an ad that is about your content and the problem you solve, not the company.
Exactly. Yeah. And then there you go. There's another, you asked about mistakes earlier. There's another one, is just going straight to here's what we sell and advertising that. Well, how about writing an exceptional problem solving piece of content or filming a video about it and using that as the content for your ad. Because I mean, is somebody more likely to, be receptive to an advertising message or something that's actually going to help them? Well, almost all the time it's going to be the latter. So why not be helpful in that process and draw them in that way?
Yeah. And your job is a lot of detective work, isn't it? It's like, how do you sift through all the possibilities to find, what is the right mix for that particular client?
Yeah, it absolutely is. Because there are definitely patterns you match for sure. I mean, that's when you serve an audience that is a specific niche, you do that because you get really good at solving problems that a lot of people like them encounter. But that doesn't mean you can just apply the same formula. You need to look at where their particular audience lives, and as a result, what the things they need to be doing, what those people care about, how big that total addressable market is, which might determine how broadly you can market versus how specific, how much you need to dial in on specific accounts. So yeah,
because listening to the salespeople trying to dissect who has bought, how that decision was made, where did it start?
Mm-hmm.
It didn't start in procurement. It probably didn't start in the C-suite. It started with some engineer
exactly
doing a design, and they care about a very particular thing. What were they like? What prompted them to check it out? Was it word of mouth?
Exactly right.
Yeah, and kind of reverse engineer it to like, okay, well, how do we get that word of mouth going?
Exactly. Yeah. And you hear, I one in the early conversations with clients, what I hear the pushback is, well, yeah, but the decision maker is way up here. And I say, yeah, but
what decision?
If that's who you're talking to, yeah. Who are all the people that influence the first 90% of that buying process, right? And you're exactly right. It's engineers, it's plant managers, it's the technical professionals who are experiencing some kind of issue. They uncover the issue, and if you can help guide them in terms of how to fix that, first of all, or what potential solutions are, okay, now you're in the conversation much earlier on. And you're going to be the one influencing every step of the way, as opposed to arriving when they are already solution aware and pulling in procurement, who's just going to haggle with you on price. And yeah.
And what excites you about digital marketing and the future of it?
Yeah. A lot of things. I think the technology changes so fast, and it's easy to get distracted by all the tools. You have to kind of temper your excitement to a degree around that. But it is pretty cool to see just some of the technologies that are emerging in terms of AI and the lead intelligence you can gather on individuals to help you make informed sales decisions. And some of that stuff's been around for a while, but it's getting better and better and more readily accessible to you. The ability to hyper target very specific people and not waste your ad spend because you're delivering this message to this type of person and this one to this type of person. So I think it's that sort of fusion of the technology that's available to us with really smart strategy. The technology by itself isn't going to do the trick. Like you need to start with really sound strategy and kind of bring that together.
And do you see the old playbook, the old SEO playbook changing? Like write a bunch of blogs about these keywords so you rank and you got backlinks.
Yeah,
and that's great if somebody Googles what you do.
Right. Yeah, it's absolutely still relevant, but it's changed dramatically. The saturation of content now. It's like 5 to 8 years ago, everybody kind of accepted, all the laggards accepted, all right, I guess we should do content. And so the answer was, all right, let's crank out a blog post every other day, and it doesn't matter what it's about. We're just going to target
listicle to death.
Publish a bunch of garbage if that's what it takes. Hire freelancers to do this stuff in an hour for $25. And I always say that content needs to start with the things the customers that you are trying to reach actually care about. And yes, there's a place for SEO, and yeah, absolutely, you should look at how to keyword optimize those pieces. But I think it's usually the wrong approach to say, let's build a keyword list and then figure out what content to write so that we can rank for it. It's let's figure out what our customers care about, and then let's craft amazing content that speaks to those things and figure out, the SEO play. But it's not just about inbound and SEO. It's why not go directly at the people that you're trying to reach to, and use paid media to amplify the reach of that really amazing content. So it all works together.
Yeah, because on the sales side, I've always found it weird that we've taken this technology and given it to the least qualified people we could find. And and then they build this cadence that burns their market.
Yeah, absolutely.
And their answers to do more of it.
Yeah, and you're just wasting opportunities because a tool let you check off more boxes in one day, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a huge need to still be filled. The sales enablement is certainly a buzzword, and there's plenty of people who are doing that or doing something that they're calling that. But to really be able to help salespeople leverage technology and use it in a way that makes them more effective at what they do, not just more efficient in terms of burning through more people on a list, right?
Right, because I think we're past the point of the requirement of marketing to get us contacts.
Yeah, absolutely.
People who are interested in our ebook, because today we know who we want to talk to.
Yep.
We know their email address. We know a lot about them.
Yep.
We don't need marketing to get them. We need marketing to create interest, awareness,
absolutely,
curiosity, so that they surface and are open to talking to us.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if you want to go download a list of your whole addressable market in the next week, you can sign up for Uplead for something like that for, a couple $100 and get contacts and run them through filter, make sure they're good. Great. But anybody can do that. And everybody knows how to do that now, And so I think it's absolutely about delivering a message that resonates and then understanding, how to follow up in a human way, how to customize a message. If you're sending out emails to 100 people this week, to be able to look at who's actually engaging with these things, who's coming back to your website, we sent out a newsletter yesterday. It's just purely, helpful content we send out every 2 weeks. And I always have about 2 hours devoted that afternoon to looking at which individuals are engaged. And if it's new people that haven't previously been engaged, I'm probably reaching out to them on LinkedIn just to say, hey, notice you get some of our content and we just want to connect. Let me know if I can ever point you in the right direction. I'm not asking for anything. I'm just sort of making a human connection, and I've found that to be incredibly helpful. It leads to sales conversations. I've closed a handful of deals in the last year, and we don't need many deals a year for our business to run. Right. So I think that's the kind of stuff you need to do. That's how you use technology appropriately.
And I wonder, when will marketing and even sales get away from what they think is volume, how big your list is, how big the pipeline is.
Yeah.
None of that really matters. Sometimes it's counterproductive.
Yeah. Yeah.
The pipeline, it doesn't matter. It's what closes that matters.
Of course.
Right? Your list doesn't matter. It matters to people who care about your product and are going to help you either buy or talk about it.
Absolutely. Totally agree. Yeah. So there's a subjective piece of marketing that maybe was, frowned upon 5 years ago, just the idea of engagement and that being, a vanity metric, but there is something very real about it. We can't measure it all the time the way that you can measure, things like a conversion on your website but when people are consuming your content consistently, they are having positive interactions with your brand when you're not there talking to them. The impact of that can make all the difference. I have a couple customers right now who've started with clients of ours that started recently who, both of them said, like, one of them was, my first touch with them was 2 years ago. And then they kind of just went dark and then they came back a year ago and then went dark again, but I didn't spend much time with them, but they have opened and I see it every time they open all my emails, they click through. And finally we talked again, a couple months ago, and he said, hey, Joe, we've been reading everything you've published for the last few years. the time's right now. And we're not even looking at any other firms because we already feel like we know you and we believe in the philosophy. Yeah. So that's what you want to replicate. Now, if you're trying to sell a million thing, if you're in a volume game and you're, you're selling software or whatever, I don't know. I can't really speak to that world so much, but when it's
especially like in your market, it's about a latent pain turning into an active pain. When do we need marketing? Can we get by with what we have now? Can we just, cobble together some solution? And then it becomes an active pain and you've got the know, like, and trust established.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, if you cold called them once a month over the last 2 years, you're the last guy they would go to, right?
Absolutely. I'd be in their spam. My emails would all be in their spam. They wouldn't be delivered to them. They'd probably block my number. And if I ever got through to them by accident, they'd probably start yelling at me. So yeah, but if you just start consistently delivering value and insights that are relevant to them, because that audience, what they care about, and you don't ask for anything in return, it sounds counterproductive in some ways, but it's not. It's how you establish trust.
Right. In your market, you would prioritize based off of active pain in market right now. Mm-hmm. Because your likelihood of converting somebody with latent pain, not in market, an unknown, into active, very limited. You want somebody who recognizes the value that you bring, feels the pain that you solve.
Yep, absolutely.
And what everybody else out there thinks that everybody's at the same state. They just have to hear from me.
Yeah.
It's like, no.
Yeah. I mean, you put yourself in their shoes, right? I mean, think about when you're buying a car. Like, right. I think about, I've been driving the same car for way long. I'll tell you right now. But for the last couple of years, I see. I got 2 little kids. Every time I see a mid-size SUV drive down the road, I know exactly what it is, and I've probably looked at it online. 4 or 5 years ago, it wasn't on my radar. Any TV commercial I saw, just kind of flew right over my head. And but it's right now I have a need, right? I'm in the market, so hopefully no car salesmen are watching this right now.
Right, they get a couple calls. Which model do you like?
I think I'm leaning towards the Ford Explorer right now, but we'll see what happens.
Well, that's it, because same here. It's like nobody just wakes up one day, I'm going to get a new car.
Yeah, of course, right?
The car is depreciating. It needs repairs. You've got it paid off. You got a new bonus, hopefully.
Yeah.
And it builds up, and then you start driving by the lot, and that's what the car salesmen know is like, if you're on the lot, you're in market.
Yeah, you got it.
And they know if you take the test drive and you walk away and you didn't buy, you're not coming back, right? There's this moment of time. And we can't think that everybody's in that moment of time. We got to build up to it.
Of course not. And you bring up a good point too. And if you come back to what I was talking about a few minutes ago, if you're sending this content and you see who's coming back and who's consuming it, well, I can also see when those individuals are visiting pages on my site that show some level of buying intent. If they're looking at all the individual people on my team, they're looking at our case studies, if they're looking at pages that explain how our pricing models work. Okay, well, now you have somebody who's not only sales qualified, but maybe closer to sales ready. And now who are we going to spend our time with, right? Like that is technology that sales professionals need to be able to understand and make use of, because that's the stuff that's going to help you prioritize your time in an effective way.
Cool. Hey, it's been a fun conversation, Joe. Where do people go to connect with you and learn more about your company?
Yeah, so I would direct everybody to gorilla76.com/learn, which is our learning center. And that's where we publish all the stuff that I'm preaching about right now, purely helpful content. So.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed that interview. Hey, I want to make sure you're checking out b2brevenue.com. That is where you can get a free copy of an ebook that I did. It's a real ebook. It's not a fluff book. It shows and talks about how companies make buying decisions and how you can influence that from both a marketing and a sales standpoint, how to find all the people that are in the decision path and what they need to see, know, and touch and feel before they make a product selection. If your team needs some coaching, some help, some training, some systems, some processes that do work today, because we know what doesn't work, or you know what doesn't work, I'll show you what does work and how to connect and get into pretty much any account. It includes deal coaching and content community, and I can customize it for your particular company. Just go to b2brevenue.com, look under training, schedule a call with me. We can talk it over, or just sign up. You can pay per month or all at once, whichever makes most sense for your budget. Also, I put out videos pretty much daily on LinkedIn and on YouTube. On LinkedIn, it's Brian G. Burns, and on YouTube, it's Brian Burns Sales. Just search for that if you like to consume some video content. And if you see me on LinkedIn, please put a comment and a share and a like on some of the videos. I really appreciate it. I've got a company page for each podcast. This one, the B2B Revenue Leadership Podcast, where I put both content and humor videos out daily. And tell a friend about the podcast. Really appreciate you listening. Check out the show notes for all the partners and the connections you can make there, the coupon codes for the products to evaluate them, see if they're a right match for you. And we'll see you next time.